They didn't ask what happened. They didn't ask how it affected me. They looked at me and said, "You need to let it go." That's when I realized this wasn't about healing. It was about erasing what they didn't want to deal with. So I stood up and walked away, knowing that once I did, I wouldn't be welcomed back the same way. They said it like it was advice, like they were doing me a favor. "You're holding on to things," my mother told me. "It's not healthy." Everyone nodded. That's when I understood something important. They weren't asking me to heal. They were asking me to disappear. No one asked what I was supposed to let go of. No one asked why it still mattered. Because details would have made it uncomfortable. And comfort, not truth, was the priority in that room. I sat there quietly while they explained how moving on worked, how time had passed, how intentions mattered more than impact, how bringing it up again only caused tension. They spoke with confidence, the kind that comes from never being the one who pays the cost. I asked one question: what happens if I don't let it go? The room went still. My father cleared his throat. "Then you're choosing to stay stuck." There it was, the threat disguised as concern. I looked around the table, at people who benefited from my silence, at people who wanted peace without accountability, at people who needed me to forget so they wouldn't have to remember. And I realized something that settled everything. They didn't want resolution, they wanted compliance. That's when I stood up. No anger, no speech, no explanation. "I'm not doing that," I said. They looked confused. Not because they didn't understand, but because they'd never prepared for refusal. As I walked away, I heard my mother say, "You're being dramatic." She was wrong. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being finished. And the moment I left that room, the chain reaction began. Because when you refuse to let something go, the people who relied on your silence start losing control. They didn't react right away. That was intentional. Silence has always been their favorite tool, the kind meant to make you doubt yourself, replay the conversation, wonder if you were too harsh. I didn't wonder. I waited. The first message came the next morning. From my mother. We were just trying to help. I read it once and didn't respond. Because help doesn't come with conditions. By the afternoon, the tone shifted. My father called. "You've made things uncomfortable," he said. "Everyone's upset." "I didn't cause that," I replied. "I just didn't pretend it was fine." He sighed. "You're refusing to move on." "No," I said calmly. "I'm refusing to erase it." That's when the narrative changed. Suddenly, I was the problem. I was holding grudges. I was living in the past. I was making everything heavier than it needed to be. No one mentioned the original issue. No one took responsibility for what they wanted me to forget. They didn't need to. Blame was easier than accountability. The pressure escalated quietly. Group chats went silent when I joined. Plans were made without looping me in. Updates came late, if they came at all. It wasn't accidental, it was correction. My sibling tried next. "You know they won't apologize," they said. "So what's the end game here?" I thought about that. "There isn't one," I replied. "I'm just not pretending anymore." They didn't like that answer. A few days later, my mother said it outright. "If you keep acting like this, you're going to push people away." I paused before responding. "People who need me to be quiet to stay comfortable were already gone," I said. She didn't reply. What surprised me most wasn't the distance. It was how quickly they moved from concern to consequence. They wanted my refusal to feel costly. They wanted me to associate honesty with loss. But the longer I held my ground, the clearer something became. They weren't reacting to what I was holding on to. They were reacting to the fact that I wouldn't let them decide what mattered. And once that control slipped, everything else started to unravel. Once let it go stopped working, they changed tactics. They stopped minimizing, they started managing. The messages became more deliberate, shorter, carefully worded, stripped of anything that could be questioned later. My mother stopped calling and started texting. Documentation disguised as concern. We just want things to be normal again. Normal, I realized, meant quiet. My father tried reason. "You're punishing everyone over one issue," he said. I corrected him. "I'm refusing to be erased over it." He didn't respond to that. Instead, he warned me. "This is how families break." "No," I said. "This is how patterns do." That's when access started closing. I found out about family decisions after they were made. Events were planned without checking my availability. Information was shared selectively. Only what they thought I deserved to know. It wasn't subtle, it was strategic. They wanted distance to feel like loss. But something unexpected happened. It felt like clarity. Without the constant pressure to move on, I finally had space to think about what I'd been asked to sacrifice. My memory, my experience, my right to name what happened. All so other people wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. The final attempt came dressed as compromise. A message suggesting we meet halfway. I asked what halfway looked like. Silence. Then, "You apologizing so we can all move forward." That was the moment everything locked into place. Because it confirmed what I already knew. There was no version of peace that included my truth. So I stopped responding, not out of spite, out of certainty. Days passed without messages, then weeks. They weren't reflecting. They were waiting for guilt to do what pressure couldn't. But guilt only works when you believe you've done something wrong. And I didn't. That's when I understood the real cost of refusing to let it go. You don't just lose access, you lose the illusion of unconditional belonging. And once that illusion is gone, the system that depended on it collapses quietly. Because the people who benefit from your silence rarely know what to do when you keep speaking, even if the only thing you say is no. What they never understood was this. I wasn't holding on to anger. I was holding on to reality. Time passed, not dramatically, not loudly, just enough for the pressure to fade and the truth to sharpen. They stopped reaching out, not because they understood, but because they realized there was nothing left to negotiate, no apology coming, no silence to rely on, no version of me willing to play along. Life on my side didn't collapse the way they warned it would. It simplified. The constant mental rehearsal stopped. The anxiety about saying the wrong thing disappeared. The need to monitor reactions vanished. For the first time, I wasn't managing other people's comfort at the expense of my own clarity. They eventually tried once more. A neutral message, carefully phrased, no ownership, no accountability, just a suggestion that enough time had passed. I read it slowly, then I deleted it. Because time doesn't erase harm when the people responsible refuse to name it. It just makes the pattern undeniable. I used to believe that letting things go was the same as being strong. I don't anymore. Now I know strength sometimes looks like refusing to forget. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. My family told me to let it go. They thought that meant forgiving quietly and moving on. What it actually did was show me exactly how much of myself I'd been expected to abandon just to belong. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It wasn't impulsive. It was precise. It was the moment I stopped confusing peace with erasure. I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left because I finally understood something simple. If your truth makes people uncomfortable and their comfort requires your silence, then silence is the cost of staying. And I wasn't willing to pay it anymore. They asked me to let it go. I didn't. I let them go instead. And that decision didn't end the conflict. It ended the control. That's what changed everything.